Okay, we are back. I hope you have a coffee or a tea and a snack and are ready to get going. Join me in a warm welcome to the President of the Australian Local Government Association, Linda Scott. Linda, you are a powerful champion for local government, regularly leading thinking around the role and future of local government. We're super excited to hear your thoughts today on circular economy and communities. So over to you.
Thanks so much, Lisa. It's lovely to see you and lovely to see you all online today. Before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm here in beautiful Sydney Town Hall, so my apologies if it's a little bit echoey, but I am speaking to you from the beautiful lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. As Lisa said, I'm really passionate about the development of a circular economy, and in that capacity I'm really lucky then to, as well as being a City of Sydney councillor, also be the National President of the Australian Local Government Association. And it's my job therefore to support and work with and be the voice of the nation's 537 local governments. And so we have a really, really exciting role to play, as you've heard this morning, and I'm sure all have a deep knowledge of in the further development of a circular economy here in Australia. Of course, I can't help but point out in my job on behalf of councils that we're now at a minimum 7 weeks away, at a maximum 7 weeks away from a federal election. And of course, people are going to be facing some stark choices around a huge range of issues that relate to our Commonwealth government, but particularly for us, the future of how we look after waste, recycling and create a circular economy. And these really are priority issues for the Australian Local Government Association's board. Of course, we all know Australia is one of the world's largest waste generators per capita. And I really do want to call that out because we've heard about some of the great programs this morning. I'm really proud of some of the great work local governments are doing. But this production capacity is really at the heart of a problem. If we don't start to prevent, then it's going to get to the point where councils simply can't do our job anymore, and that is to sort out all that household waste. And so I think we do really need to have that important prevention conversation. But secondary to that, of course, it also means we have a lot of materials with which to form a better, stronger, more robust circular economy. But it is important to call out that we're running out of landfill and that recycling collection costs for councils are significant. They continue to rise, and so these are things that present us with challenges, and particularly financial challenges. Many local governments are under significant financial stress. I don't think it would come as a surprise to this audience to tell you that, and as you can imagine, as we've seen recently in New South Wales and Queensland, the significant natural disasters coming off the top of earlier natural disasters, in some cases in the same places, are causing significant financial and waste problems for these councils. So we have to find better ways of doing this that are not so economically challenging, and we can do it in a more productive way. We also want to make sure, though, that we're all striving in the same direction, and that is to reach zero waste commitments, where, of course, we reduce our total waste generated and halve the amount of organic waste sent to landfill. There needs to be more support for local government's efforts in the circular economy. And we need all the scientists, all the waste recovery staff, all of you to be having these conversations, particularly in the next 7 weeks, because we know that responding and managing waste and recycling is such a critical issue for the future of our nation, and such a critical issue for whomever forms the next Commonwealth government. It's why we're asking the next Commonwealth government to fund $100 million per annum over 4 years to help local government circular economy waste innovation projects. So, of course, we were very excited to see over the weekend the announcement from the government, and particularly, of course, the CSIRO, about some very significant funding, $50 million towards waste and circular economy innovation. But we know that without that linking funding in local governments, the implementation of these things is going to be extremely problematic. So, for example, it's so fantastic that we've got some of the best materials to use in our road base in Australia. In fact, we're manufacturing these things in a circular way here. We've already heard this morning about the great efforts with Venus Sajawala and at UNSW to create building materials. But without the ability to test these materials, ensure that these materials are to standard, that local governments are allowed to procure, allowed to use them under the different local government standards across each of the jurisdictions in Australia, it's very difficult for us to convert these materials into something we use on a daily basis, to translate the research and innovation happening in our universities, in the CSIRO and around the world, into things that we can actually do on the ground at the local level. And that's why this innovation and translation funding is so important for councils, and it's why we're advocating so hard to whomever forms the next Commonwealth government to ensure that happens. And I just again want to give you some of the quantums, for example, from the recent floods, so you can understand the tasks that we're facing. So Brisbane City Council tips and recycling centres have recently collected almost 30,000 cubic metres of landfill, which is the equivalent of a year's worth of landfill just from this flood episode alone. In New South Wales, in Lismore, they have collected more than 1,000 tonnes of flood waste every day. 1,000 tonnes of flood waste every single day. Of course, the council's waste equipment was not totally lost in the floods. I spoke to the general manager again the other day, who said to me, we don't even have a lawnmower, Linda, we've got nothing. And so they're really establishing from the very ground up all their waste systems again. They have a temporary tip site to manage what are just extraordinary volumes of waste. And it's so important that these cleanup efforts continue, but it simply isn't the case that local governments can fund this alone, especially when it is the government of the area that has themselves been decimated by a natural disaster. With the waste export bans to be fully implemented by July 2024, and we're very proud to sit on the Environment Ministers' meetings that resolve these things, we have 2 short years in which to reduce the amount of waste going to landfill, as well as to maximise our capacity to reuse. Most of the material resources facilities in Australia that are owned or contracted by councils still lack the technical capacity to sort commingled or highly contaminated local waste into specific material types with the low contamination rates that are needed. And therefore, there's a lot to do. And it's essential that the federal government lead and coordinate a national program of investment in advanced waste processing infrastructure and regional waste hubs. We really welcome that the current Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has embarked in a conversation about recycling. I was lucky enough to attend his national summit on this topic a few years ago, but we really need to see that work progress. Councils, despite capacity restraints stemming our limited revenue raising abilities, are pioneering many innovative and exciting responses to the waste crisis, and we do that in collaboration with our local communities. When previously I was the president of the New South Wales body, we even launched our own research grant and funded in part some of the work that Ali Abbas and the team at Sydney University have done to again help that conversion piece from taking recycled materials and ensuring we had a standard that reflected the ability of councils to use that. These projects help, of course, deliver cleaner, safer environments. They ensure we can take our role in reducing emissions, creating a more sustainable world, but they also create jobs and are significant in the economic development story of Australia. And this is particularly the case in regional Australia, where we have space to build factories. We have space to generate a manufacturing industry again here in Australia. And this is such a great way to do it. But Local governments can't do this alone, and of course we need strong national leadership, binding national agreements, and we're well on our way to being filling up those parts of the puzzle. Now what we need is the incentive to invest in infrastructure in the right places, procurement targets, industry-wide programs, and of course the funding to help us translate the research. We will keep doing the job at local government level to help educate our communities about preventing waste, about ensuring our communities are sorting their waste appropriately and doing all we can to reduce contamination. But without this additional $100 million per annum over 4 years for support for local government circular economy innovation, the process will be markedly slower. So please do, in the next 7 weeks in particular, when you're talking over the dinner table to friends, have these conversations. When you're talking to your local MPs or your local opposition candidates, when you run into them at a train station or on the main street, talk to them about the importance of circular economy funding for councils, because all those conversations really do make a difference. We'll have social media posts from the Australian Local Government Association that you can share. We're so grateful for all the work and support that all of you, who I know like me are so passionate about this issue, are doing, and we look forward to continuing to work with you into the future, but in particular in the lead up to the federal election. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Linda. So a lot to think about there, and a strong message here that we need infrastructure to recycle, and also that it's not just the 3 R's of reducing, recycling, reusing, but a 4th R maybe for all of us to think about, which is to reject waste. How can consumers across those 537 local governments actually reject waste and not bring it into the household, and maybe look at as a service models and other things instead?